What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about Opendoor. I want to go over some of the data points, what is moving it, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So Opendoor is up 7.09%, 692 the high, 631 the low. So it is starting to push a little bit lower, and that's just because we're nearing the market close. It is going into a long weekend, and there's a lot of geopolitical things such as Iran and obviously Greenland that could really escalate over the weekend. So this is why you're seeing a certain level of consolidation, but still it's doing phenomenal today. So I'll go over the technicals and so forth later in the video. Aside from that, we did have manufacturing data. So month over month, it came in at 0.2 versus forecast at 0.1, matching with yesterday's manufacturing data. So New York and Philly, which came in huge, a massive expansion. So definitely things are looking pretty a-okay behind the scenes. One thing that the market, or helped kind of the market move higher earlier on, was this. Trump just saying that he convinced himself to hold off on Iran strikes, but I think there's still going to be a certain level of fear of a what if type of scenario. In Opendoor's case, there was no news today, but since my last video, they did put this out right here. So Opendoor names president and CFO to accelerate next chapter. So they named a new president, and the CFO is Christie. Previously it was just interim, but looks like effective January 1st, 2026, it's going to be permanent, all said and done. So let me know your general thoughts on that. I know based on previous videos, I've indicated that Christie is somewhat of a kind of red flag, not officially, but every time her name is mentioned, usually the stock price does close in the red, just maybe a weird coincidence or something like that. So hopefully things change for that. One thing though that did recently come out for stats that is a massive catalyst for Opendoor is this right here. So mortgage rates dropped to 3-year low, and so it went to around 6.06, still relatively high if you think about it, but at least it's moving in the right direction. So it is estimated to be around 5.5 by the end of this year. So that would be again increasing demand, because just moving minor amounts, it did really kind of boost the demand for December. So it contributed to a 5% rise in December home sales. So that's deserving of a round of applause. And based on everything that Opendoor has kind of working on kind of behind the scenes, then 2026 should be a huge transformational year for Opendoor. On a side note, I know some people are complaining that CAS isn't putting out any news, and they're in a quiet period. So until Opendoor does put out their earnings, which they haven't announced the date just yet, until they do that, then they can actually start putting out some new stuff, and obviously CAS can get back to talking, because there really hasn't been that much in speculative stuff. Estimated earnings date is going to be February the 20th, but that is, again, just completely a estimate. Closer to that date, I'll give you a further overview and whatever else, but this is the current estimates right now. -9 cents for the earnings per share, 592 million for revenue. And then over the last 90 days, we have 3 positive and 1 negative revisions to the earnings per share. And this is a good representation that analysts are always changing their estimates without officially changing their rating, because we haven't had any official ratings recently, but clearly analysts are changing kind of the key metrics behind the scenes. Aside from all of that fun stuff, looking at shorts. So shorts are returning about 35,000 shares. 14.4% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 112.8 million shares overall being shorted. So I know I've mentioned this in the past, that Opendoor is actually trading like a true credible company. And I think the short interest is a good indication of that, because a lot of kind of unprofitable companies are roughly around that 10 to around 15% range. So I think Opendoor is within that threshold, so it's not being kind of overly manipulated and whatever. I'm sure there is obviously manipulation happening behind the scenes, such as just naked shorting, because shares on loan being at 77.9 million, number of shares being shorted 112, but clearly they're not doing anything malicious, because if they were, Opendoor would be at the $4 range or potentially less. So I think overall Opendoor is doing pretty a-okay. DTC is at 1.22 days, so it really does signal that still shorts are overextended. 7.2 million in calls, 1.8 in puts, so we're seeing a little bit of a bump up in the volume, options volume, and 56% of all the options being done today are bullish in nature. From a bull standpoint, you see consensus for it to be roughly around 7. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 650. So definitely a lot more upside than down. With today being Friday, just take notice of this. So we have 14,000 at that 650 for open interest, 8,000 at that 6, 46,000 at that 7. So it is fair to assume, given where it is right now, that 7 is off the table. So at least you're going to have 14,000 at the 650 and then 8,000 at that 6. So you might see some abnormal transactions after hours. So I'll cover that in my weekend video, so stay tuned for that. But aside from that, these are some of the transactions occurring so far on the secondary market, and then these are some of the transactions occurring on the dark pool. So a lot of hold numbers, so it goes to show that hedge funds most likely are the culprit on why Opendoor is truly moving higher. And I'm sure most of the hedge funds are buying based on just the macro conditions, so the manufacturing data, plus this right here, that's huge. Absolutely huge. And it's kind of funny. So when Opendoor did hit that $5 range or something, and Trump mentioned that he was going to be purchasing 200 billion in bonds, and that was going to really drop the mortgage prices. Like in general, like the writing was on the wall that was a screaming buy. I even did a video saying it was, but obviously some people don't like to listen, unfortunately. But nonetheless, aside from all that, this is still a pretty good catalyst, and most likely, given the circumstances, mortgage rates are going to continue to drop. Couple key points though, with it at 674. It is trading between this pivot and this S1, so 633 is going to be a strong support. Kind of bounce off of that general range, so 631 the low, so bounce off of this. We know it's a good support level. 706 is going to be the next strong target, and that hasn't been tested today, so that's going to be something to really watch for, most likely next week. On Tuesday. Stay tuned for my video over the weekend where I go over some expectations though. Aside from all of that, on the actual chart itself, things are looking pretty good. Right now it's just wedge bound between that 50-day moving average and also 10. So it kind of bounced off of that 50. So that 50 is currently at 693. So again, another element to watch for next week. And in Opendoor's case, it's broken above that 50 numerous times. Really failed to kind of stay there though. If you do see it stay above that point for 2 consecutive days, then this is where you can see some very, very nice price action. Last time that did occur was back in July. So if it does again close above that, it might be advantageous just to kind of look at some long calls. So obviously today it bounced off of that, but again, you can make some pretty good money on based on moving the technicals and kind of removing emotion. Just look at the data. That's sometimes not that difficult. But aside from that though, looking at the market position, you see a lot more willing buyers, still a good amount of willing sellers, up to around that 780 for the most part, but still a good amount of willing buyers. No new analyst ratings, as I've mentioned, but still they're kind of changing some estimates behind the scenes. Nothing really significant for any articles either. So it is just at the mercy of the broader market, but clearly the market wants to move Opendoor higher. Let me know your thoughts on Opendoor. Are you buying? Are you selling? What are you generally doing? If you are looking for some solid buy signals though, pop over to my Patreon. I put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades. Definitely many of them have been on point. A lot of them are actually up roughly about 100 to about 150%. A lot of the day trades, so worthwhile to kind of pop over there and check that out. I have a $10 promotion on a side note up until the end of this upcoming weekend, so pop over there, link in the description below and also the comments. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.